Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. For those
Okay.
who can't see you
Um,
yet, hold
well,
on.
I'm just really grateful to be here. I was just emailing with Renata earlier about how amazing it is that we can even do this, because like just 5 years ago, I couldn't even imagine us having the opportunity to be beaming in from all these different places and sharing this kind of conversation. So I'm just grateful to be here and to be facilitating this conversation. Um, Tony, thank you so much for your presentation and your words. And me, I caught the walk from earlier, and it was amazing to suddenly be in a completely distant land with, people you are with, instantly. It was very surreal and very beautiful. Um, I guess the first question I had, and I know that this is just a conversation, so let's just see where it goes, was I've been learning more and more about both of you and both of your work, and I'm very moved by it. And I was just wondering, I guess for my first question is, when you walk and when you bring these histories to light, Black histories and decolonial histories, I'm wondering, maybe consciously, unconsciously, subconsciously, who's actually walking with you? Do you have somebody in mind who's been walking with you this time that has been kind of guiding you in this work that you're creating, that you're doing, you're and who's kind of guiding you to guide others as you take this walk of creating new histories and bringing communities together and bringing to light Black history and decolonial histories. Who walks with you?
Yeah, I would say for myself, sometimes when I'm doing the walk, well, when I designed them, first of all, I thought a lot about my parents as to what they experienced when they were in London in 1950s and 60s when things were much worse than they are now. And I kind of tried to honor them by telling their stories to people who would never hear about their stories. So we talk about how, back in those days, they did not have any central heating. You had to get what's called a paraffin heater, which is basically a very flammable liquid and then buy the flammable liquid, bring it into the house, pour it into the machine, the heater, and put it on. But what happened is that because it was such a flammable liquid, often there'd be fires in people's homes. So that's something that people don't often know about. But even the fact that we have phones in our houses now, because back in those days they didn't have no phone. So what they would do is they'd have a public phone on the corner of the street, and they would memorize the number, and then they would ring if they want to speak to, let's say, this person in this house at number 43. They would memorize the number and tell their friend to ring this number. The phone would ring. Someone would walk past the red phone box. They'd pick up the phone, and the person would say, "Can you go and knock on the door, number 42, and tell them that Fred's on the phone?" And then that's what would happen. And that they were doing it up into the 1980s. So when I'm telling my stories, I bring a lot of my family's influence into it, and it's a way of showing respect for what they went through to have me be alive in the first place.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending the walk who were online. So I am really, I just moved fast forward to come here, like between coming from Pelourinho to my place. I am happy that was just 15 minutes. It's a holiday, that we don't have a lot of traffic. Um, So who walks with me? I think this is a great question, Christine, because that reminds me two things. One is the lyrics, a song from Maria Bethânia. She says something that is related to don't bother with me because I don't walk alone. You know, this powerful, vibrant, energetic way to say I am a woman, and even though I am a woman, or the inequality and the biases we face every day, I have the people who walk with me, not just because I have a good friend, but because I have this spiritual guide and ancestry. And thinking from that, I thought how when you're talking about who is out walking with me, I literally goes back to my ancestry because I am a granddaughter of an indigenous person, and the other side is a black person, Afro-Brazilian. And a few months ago, I discovered that I also have a Polish grandfather. So, you know, a lot of people walking to come to Brazil and to meet. And then, and I think when I think this idea that when I am walking with and concerned at that, even though in Brazil I have a white passability, I see that how consciousness I have like a commitment to bring that to my to the way I have been thinking and circulating in the world. Yeah, yeah.
Well, as these things go, I have a list of questions, but there's something that you both mentioned that I just want to ask because I see it in both of your work. Because me, you started off answering with sound. And actually, I've noticed for both of you, in the kind of work that you do, which invites something somatic, something embodied, something to do with the senses very deeply in learning and illuminating new histories or illuminating buried histories or histories that are maybe resisting the traditional archive. Does walking is walking related or has a relationship to sound in the walking and the writing and the telling that you do? Or perhaps when I say walking and sound in making a new history, what is the image or what is the sound that comes to mind for you?
I'm gonna
As
let
you
me
were,
go
sorry.
first.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I am just, it sounds for me, it sounds right for me like a food for thought because as you are asking me, I am just hearing, I am listening the birds. It's 2 p.m. So as we are talking, I think when we are on the streets, I think the urban setting invite us to feel, and the way we feel, the way we are invited to the sensorial landscape is actually moved by the way we sense, we smell, we gaze, but also how the sounds in the environment bring us to the, you know, it seems sometimes it's the right sense. Because as we are seeing through the walk action, I was, even though I was a mute, you are sensing that something was going on. And then the procession came and just crossed it. And I was not more able to keep talking, even muted. But then we're able to see that we have movements in the sound where the sounds where that enable that you to see because the body changed and everything create a different action from that on.
I would
Tony,
say I would say that sound is a big deal when it comes to a walker because you're literally, well, especially in London, which is a busy urban city with traffic and roadworks, etc. So you have to navigate where you're going to talk about the history to make sure you don't get this overwhelming sound of a jackhammer trying to knock down a concrete wall, etc., which happened to me a lot. Or even the bus or motorcycle driving past you. So you have to kind of be aware of that. And then you have the sound of your own voice where you're talking, you're telling the story. You have to make sure that people can hear that story and that you can hear what they're saying too. Because when I'm doing a walk, it's a two-way street. So I'm asking questions like I did just now. You see that pineapple thing. What I do is like on my walking tours, right? If I'm doing that walk into St. Paul's area, they don't know what's going to happen. So at the beginning of the walk, I'll say, here you go. I'll pull a pineapple out of my bag and I say, right, you look strong. You carry this pineapple for the next 2 hours, etc. And then at a certain point, I'll discuss why you're carrying a pineapple. So I will make the experience interactive by giving the guys things that they're going to carry for the next half an hour, etc. And then I'll tell them when we get to a certain point, because at a certain point you can actually stand and see the pineapples on the top of St. Paul's, but they don't know they're pineapples. And that's when I'll say, okay, the thing you got in your hand there is that thing on top of the statue there, etc. And that makes it a lot more relevant. But yeah, sound is very important because if they can't hear you, then there's no point doing a walking tour.
Tony, I guess I was thinking for you. I went online and I went on some of your walks that are online, and you had mentioned this coming across a restaurant in a neighborhood, and delving into history of the steel pan, the sounds that are the music coming out of the restaurant. And then you were able to trace from the restaurant and the community, the Black community that was organizing at a certain time period within the restaurant around music, and also tracing it to another place, another geography. So maybe a question around how is it that a walk through a local space brings you and connects you back and forth to other places, and how this is all comes together as a diasporic history that is important for us to learn.
Yeah, yeah, you're quite right. The music is a big deal. So that restaurant was probably the Mangrove Restaurant, which is in Notting Hill, and that was a place where they used to train young people to play the steel pan, the steel band music instrument, etc. But of course, that instrument comes out of the Caribbean, comes out of Trinidad, where they get these old 60-gallon oil drums and then actually make them into musical instruments. And now you find those instruments being used in all these top 10 hits like that 50 Cent sings or French Montana sings. So you often find steel pan using it in a lot of hip hop popular songs. And if you're walking on the street, you often hear these songs. And if the group is kind of on that level that know about this kind of music, you can then use the sound to tell the story and take it to a whole different area. That in fact, I should admit, because you're in Brazil, right, me, so you must know all about steel pan and how it's part of the whole culture there, and that you can't really talk about steel pan, steel drum without thinking about how it originated in certain favela areas and how it wasn't seen as a nice thing, and now it's seen as the most best thing ever because of how things have changed because of resistance. So, I mean, leave it to you.
Thank you. You know, Tony, I actually I need to say that I think I was able to, in, no, in 2019 I was in London and a friend of mine invited me one of your wall walks. I am not sure it's exactly your walk, but I think it was a walk on about a black sands. I don't know if you do this kind of subject, but I remember being in London in 2019 in experiencing this walking perspective of going to different places in London and see black sands. I don't know, it's the kind of walk you do, but yeah, I remember that. And when Renat said, "Oh, you're doing something about London," I say, "Oh, I might have done this." So because I am really pretty into walk, but think about the space to the other place. So I was talking to a colleague, Paulina Martina, during the breakout rooms, and we are exchanging from where we learned to walk and how that inform the practice, right? So I was sharing to her that walks became something that was concerned to me when I moved to United States, when I moved to LA. And in the LA, there's a famous song that say nobody walks in LA. And because people used to drive, and that drove me to a different direction to my life, actually, because I kind of got tired this idea of when we were walking in LA that's gonna inform people that you are not middle class or so any kind of class. You become an immigrant, and even though I was immigrant, I was able to have a car, and then that became to me something that I was always paying attention how this idea of the value that brings into walk. Because being in Brazil, I was able to walk in São Paulo. We have a pretty good public transportation. Then I moved to United States. And in LA, nobody walks. And then I was doing research last year in Angola, and I also learned that walking was also something that's concerned to security and violence. It depends on the kind of the body you represent. So as in Angola, I am reading as a white woman foreigner, so that I should be careful to that. So that gave me a lot of thoughts to think, what is the politics? Not just a matter of walking, but how to understand walking in a specific place. So I see that when you think about walking, I am always think who is the body who is able to walk and who is right, how we are dealing with this kind of identity in that sense.
My mind is swimming with that. I wonder how you can relate that, these ideas of your body, your gendered, class, raced body, the physical capacities of your body. How does that intersect with, because I think you both do walking, you do talking, you do narrating, you do writing, you are with students, and when you're with students, you are, Tony, I think you've mentioned showing films, and me, I think for you, you've also talked about audio visual and different forms of media in embodied teaching and learning. So I'm wondering, yeah, how do these kind of do they do different things for you? Do they pull out different ways of putting together the history and communicate? Is it important to have these different modes to communicate these histories to students? Is there an
Yeah, I
instinct
mean,
that you have, for one particular mode over the other?
yeah, I mean, I give an example of how your body can affect how you deliver the content is because if I'm with a white, let's say if there's 15 white students in my group, right, and I walk into a certain museum, I can walk through there for 3 hours, 5 hours, no problem at all. No one's gonna look at me at all. If I go in there with 15 black people, they'll be watching me wherever I go. And what I do is I'll bring that into the conversation. So I'll just use the experience of how I look to how I'm treated to how it links into the history I'm talking about. And I find that's very for the students, it's very impactful, especially for the white students, because they've not really experienced that before, but they can sometimes see it when they're on a walk with me, for example.
Me
Yeah,
too.
and wow, yeah, I am just thinking what Tony said. It's really, that impacts a lot the way we are seeing, the way we are engaged with the public right now. So here in Salvador, I remember, so the first time I have this idea walking as a pedagogical way to teach fashion aesthetics in a decolonial perspective. I was in Angola, and I remember this, the first idea I came that was supposed to, you should be talking about secondhand market in Africa. And I thought, instead of just screening a movie from made on in England, why we don't go to the markets where they are being impacted by this kind of problem that Global North is creating? And I remember the curator at that specific festival said, "No, this is too dangerous. We should not go there." And then he raised several problematics way that we should not attend it. But that resonates with me in this idea: who is able to walk where? Because where some people are, because in Brazil, actually, I think 10, 11 years ago, we also have a movement where lower middle class, even though they were able to have some, how can I say that? Even though they have a social mobility by accessing money, they were not enabled to access like the malls. So who, even though when we have money, how you are how we are accessing and how we are entering and access this place where it seems that the money will be the way to access, but the performativity and the performance of it is actually insane. No. So for me, so I think when we are talking about the intersectionalities that fashion brings to us in the walk, I think we raise a lot of uh, a lot of good and provocation questions, because that is when we see the society in a conflict. It's because it's not just a matter to being able to walk, but who are you and from where you are, from which direction are you walking towards? Yeah.
I wonder, in thinking about both of what you just said. I wonder if there was a moment for you in your learning as you went on a walk or as you are with your students, where with either a participant or a student, where you witnessed and you watched as you are taking them through different sites, whether it's literal right in front of you, or through the text or in imagination, or through the body and then through fashion and clothing. If there was a moment that you witnessed a student have a moment of real-time woundedness or a revelation where history shifts, and something shifts for them. And if can you share with us a moment of maybe something like that where you were learning in the moment from the encounter that this person might have had?
Oh, well, I learn all the time. So like if I have like, I don't know, 15 people on the walk, there's gonna be people that are gonna know things that I have no clue about at all. Because it's interactive, I'm gonna learn something from each person. But I think the other thing you said is that can I remember a time when someone learned something and I was kind of moved from the learning that they experienced. So you see on the walks we have, we go past a bunch of churches. So some of the churches are Church of England churches, and the Church of England was directly involved in slavery in that they actually had plantations in Barbados. So the Church of England owned plantations in Barbados, and there's churches of England everywhere in London, right? So if you go past one, what I'll sometimes do is I'll pull like a book or an article which says what I just said, that the church owned slaves in the Caribbean in Barbados, and I'll name the plantation. And for some people, they've never heard that before in their life, and it's like a real slap to their face, especially if they're Christian. So I've seen people really have I don't know, a moment of serious reflection where they had to process on the spot information which has been true for like 400 years, but they've never heard it before. And they have to think, oh, how does that make me feel, think, look, behave? Now I have to deal with this information. So I've seen that happen. Well, and that's just one example I can think of. But let me go back. Let me hand back to me.
I was trying here to find one minute video that I have walked with my students, where in some moment realize that we are just walking through Pelourinho, and then we see the statue of Zumbi dos Palmares. And you know, the statue is something that you see a leader, and then you realize how that the clothes of that leader is portrayed. He's barefoot, just like a skirt, and there's no t-shirt. And by the time we are just standing and look at and gaze the statue, was something that, wow, if we think how the leaders of any kind of, if they are not Afro-Indigenous leader, how they're going to be portrayed in a statue. But as we are talking about a leader, a Black Indigenous leader, how they're portrayed here as a barefoot person with probably a half cotton trouser. You know, it's that it's kind of close, and the statue don't honor the contribution the leader had made to Brazilian society. Even because like we are celebrating him today, but we see that how we don't see the same way, the same clothes that we would see like the King of Portugal and then this quilombola leader at the same way. So the clothes and that statue speaks a lot to that situation.
Excuse me a second, me. Can I ask a quick question? Do you in Brazil, do you have statues of a man called Besaro? Besaro, I think is how you pronounce his name, but Besaro is a martial arts capoeira leader who fought against the slave master in the 1800s, I think it was. His name is Besouro, Besaro, and that's how I say it. I don't know how you say Brazil.
I can, no, I won't say yes or no because I don't have the concrete information. I can look for you and so later a follow up, but No, actually, we have a whole discussion in statute on that sense when we are talking about Black Afro-Indigenous person in Brazil, because usually the statute tends to be smaller. And when you have like a public event, they try to cover the something that they don't bother about. When it's opposed to all the colonial statue that's always in the center, big on your head, and things like that. Yeah. So probably that's why I don't know the persons, right? You are asking me. Perhaps there is somewhere in some states, but we are not truly, I cannot reaffirm that's where it's located or if it even exists.
Now my mind is around the body, and maybe this is a question. All these questions are questions I'm asking myself too, but I'm wondering, it's interesting because I think our conversation is about a kind of walking and learning that's also counter cartography in a way, but I'm wondering when you both teach, when you're with students, when you're with walkers, um, how do you teach people to notice, to attune their bodies to what dominant narratives often erase? I wonder if that ever comes to the surface for you. Because we have this word embodied in the title of this session, and I'm looking for ways to connect the feeling and the emotion and the sensation of the body as it reacts, as it engages with or is trying to resist a dominant narrative that I think both of you are working against in the work that you do.
I can go first. So I actually developed what I call a ethnographic package, where usually when I am setting up the walks, as I am doing that, which is part of my PhD research. I go some days before and talk to people that present myself, saying what I am about to do, that I'm gonna bring some students. We are working with the coloniality in fashion. So I present myself to the community, because then they're gonna be expect me to come with like 15 students, right? So, and then by the time on the day that I am all with the students, I organize what I try to do today, like a meditative mode where you come together and understand why we are there, from where is your starting point. So in the past walkings, we organize some identification. That can be a hat, can be any kind of way that we can gaze each other, because the idea that we must walk in pairs, never alone, because we need to be aware of that we are in collective way. It's important for us to be walking by side to side, but also to be exchanging these reactions. So, oh, look at this. I haven't noticed that. So I have been here for so many times, and it's the first time I'm noticing this specific site, place, aesthetics, people. And then what I call this meditative mode, usually I share from where I am proposing that this kind of what I just did, right? So I share from where I'm coming from, why this is a matter for fashion education, and I explain how this idea came to me. I just as I am proposing, I introduce myself, but I try to tag them along. So now we are part of one group, and we engage in a collective way to think about fashion. And then we walk. After we walk, at the end, usually we go to some place to have a beer, a water, something that we're gonna say. Then we are exchanging some ideas, and then we say goodbye.
For me, I just give him a biscuit. So what I'll do is I'll give him a chocolate biscuit, right? And they'll say, eat this biscuit while we go along, right? And then after half an hour, I'll say, okay, so the biscuit you ate, what was in that biscuit? Was any chocolate in the biscuit? Okay, if there's chocolate in the biscuit, how do you make chocolate? Well, you need some cocoa, right? Do we have any cocoa plantations in London? No, there's no cocoa plantations in Britain. We get our cocoa from the Ivory Coast and Ghana. That is then brought across here to be made into chocolate. So you can't have any kind of chocolate ice cream, dessert, milkshake, whatever. You cannot have it without African Caribbean history, right? Because the cocoa's coming from Africa, but then where's the sugar coming from? Do you like sweet things? English people love sweet things. Oh my goodness, they love like apple crumble and ice cream and cakes and biscuits, and you cannot make all that stuff without sugar. And all the sugar at one time was coming from the Caribbean, so it's as simple as that. You get people to do what they're gonna do anyhow, eat a biscuit, and then you analyze, discuss how is the biscuit constructed? How can you construct this biscuit without the empire, colonization, sugar, tea, coffee, cocoa? It's literally all around you. And I just kind of bring that into the actual walking tour. And it's just like self-evident after a while.
Well, I hope it's okay, Renata and Francisca. I just have two more questions at least. Please let me ask them. I'm really inspired by this conversation. I want to know from you both, you know, what forms of knowledge come only from moving together? What does collective walking create that perhaps your solitary research, your solitary writing, that it cannot? Something that really is created from a collective walk together.
So thinking about the solitary, I think right now when I am thinking about collective, how we create knowledge collectively, I think I would change the word solitary for solitude, right? And this idea that as I feel I am not walking alone, so I have this spiritual guides, I bring my ancestrality, and I bring the knowledge I have been encounter with students, friends, researchers, so I don't feel myself more in a solitary way, even though I am doing PhDs, right? So it's a lot. So I feel myself in a solitude where, even though by the time I am here, close to my green bouquets, I feel that okay, I am here. I am engaged with something that I did not create by myself, by my own, but based on these collective actions where they are informing me how I should engage in this specific topic. I think I try my best to create knowledge from this perspective, where I also see how I challenge itself, the anthropological perspective itself, where usually we go to some place and study and come back and write about that people. But I see that with this collective action in the way I do research, of course, I am not reinventing the wheel. I know there's a lot of anthropologists doing and saying the same, so I am also tagging along with them. So I feel that I am part of the world, but also I am engaged my local perspective.
I would say that what you get from the collective is you get that agreement amongst the group about fairly obvious things that if you're by yourself, you might just argue amongst yourself. But like I said, some of the stuff we're talking about, like those pineapples, for example, you can't argue there's pineapples in London that grow here naturally anyway, right? It's impossible. So when you have that kind of group um awareness, identification, and agreement, because if you have like 15 people and they're in agreement after having a look at the various evidence, it just makes the evidence a lot stronger than if you're by yourself saying, well, thinking about by on your own. So to me, it's like the group kind of gives another level of credibility. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, credibility if you get from the group.
Okay, and here's my final question. Thank you both for that's giving me a lot to think about, which is what is a walk you still long to take that you haven't taken yet?
I would like to cross San Diego to Tijuana by walk. You know, this is something that crossing borders, right? This is something that I know that is not easy, and sometimes you're not allowed to.
All right, I'm gonna cheat a little bit. So I would like to walk to Palmares in Brazil, from where Zambi escaped from. How about that? So Zambi ran off to Palmares, set up his own city there. I'd like to take that walk and see what it's like. That's what I'd like to do. Yeah.
Please invite me. I'm gonna go with you.
Me too. I'm coming along also.
You're welcome.
Thank you both so much for this really inspiring and creative and beautiful conversation. Appreciate it so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
for
much.
taking us
I
on
think,
this walk. Sorry.
yeah, I think our heads are swimming, are jumping. That was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Christina, me, and Tony. And Christina, I know that you're also doing a lot of walking practice with your students. So I have to ask you, what is the walk that you still long to take?
You know, I'm gonna have to think about that one. Haven't even thought about it for myself. Um, but I will say, you mentioned walking with my students. Something that I enjoy with my students sometimes is a walk where we walk together and we don't talk, but we're just in each other's presence. And there's something I think when we get back into the classroom and we share what we were observing and feeling and thinking and doing together. It's something that I think I wish I did more often.